Hey guys, Alex here for another video. Today I'm going to be talking about how do you know when you should compete? How do you know when you're ready? How to know what you need to know about competing basically. So I'm talking about competing in, say, fitness or bodybuilding or bikini, probably more specifically bikini today. But that's what we're going to be chatting about. How do you know? Are you ready? What do you need to get prepared? What do you need to know before you actually commit to a contest prep? Let's get into it. So the reason that I'm doing this video is because as a first-time competitor, when I competed back in, oh my god, it's gonna make me feel really old. Back in, I would say 2013, I think was my first shot, 2012. So going back about 8 years ago now, there was a lot of things that I didn't know, a lot of things that I wasn't aware of, a lot of things that nobody told me about competing that I kind of wish I had have known back then. Now, that's not to go and bag out the coaches that I was working with back in my first show, but I'll be honest, looking back on it, they weren't that experienced with coaching competitors. They were the coaches from a gym that I worked at, and because I was working there, I kind of felt obligated to listen to everything that they said. I trusted them. Everyone always trusts their coaches, and I think this is a really important thing as well. It's really important to find a coach that you can trust and that you can really know not only has your back, but that also knows their shit. That has been doing this for a long time, that has worked with many clients, had successful clients, success themselves. Although in saying that, I don't believe that you need to be a competitor to be a good coach. I think it helps. I think it makes you relate more to the client, understand what they're going through, but at the same time, you know, a lot of the best coaches in the world at different sports haven't been an athlete in that sport specifically, or they have been but not highly successful. I think it's important to have maybe gone through the process, but I'm not saying you need to be an IFBB pro to coach people successfully. I don't think that's the case, because most people that are pros have had coaches themselves. So it's not like they were the person that got them to that pro card, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'm going off topic. So let's get back to the video. How to know when you're actually ready to compete. So there's a couple of things to understand. Now, one of the big ones, and I'm just gonna knock that nail on the head right away, financially, okay? Competing is expensive. Now, I would actually say it's probably more expensive for girls than guys. And I had this discussion with my partner, Sean, he's a bodybuilder, and we had this chat. Now, I am obviously talking about natural athletes here. I'll preface that as well, because obviously if you're an enhanced male bodybuilder, it's going to be a lot more expensive for you, because you're going to be needing to buy compounds. I'm going to keep this as politically correct as possible, because I don't coach those type of athletes, no shade. I know nothing about it. That is why I keep my hands clear of it. So that being said, let's talk natural athletes. It is probably going to be more expensive as a female than a male for the most part. Why is that? Bikinis are more expensive than a pair of posing trunks. You probably need to have all of your things like hair, makeup, tanning, not just the comp day stuff, but if you're a girl and you need to get hair extensions put in, you need to get your nails done, there's all the other kind of grooming that goes with it that can really add up. And if you're a first-time competitor, also getting a lot of posing sessions. That can be expensive for a guy as well. If you're a bodybuilder or just terrible at posing in something like men's fitness or physique, you may need just as many lessons, if not more, than a female, especially for bodybuilding, because obviously you're having to hit specific poses and actually be in a flexed pose. So going back to the financials, that is definitely one thing to understand. So I get a fair few girls who are 17, 18 come to me and they want to compete. Now, two reasons I don't tend to coach many people that young. Number one is financially, it's going to be too expensive for them and put way too much stress on them. Number two, hormonally, I don't think that it's safe to have a 17, 18-year-old getting to the level of leanness that you need to get to compete at that age where your hormones are still, you know, kind of coming into their own, especially if they're a female that isn't as developed, that maybe got their period later in life. So that would be me, for example. I didn't get it till I was like 17, so the thought of me competing at 17, 18 would be quite scary. Again, depending on the federation. So let's say, for example, within Australia, we have ICN, so I compete natural, as opposed to IFBB. Now, they both have bikini divisions. The bikini look is completely different, okay? And this is where a lot of people get confused. Bikini and ICN is a lot softer, a lot fuller, a lot less muscle. IFBB bikini girls are lean, hard, full. Okay, so if it was a young competitor, and I have put a couple of girls who are 19 on stage, I always get them to do ICN. because you don't need to get them as lean. And obviously the leaner you get someone, the more of an impact it's going to have on metabolic downregulation, on your hormones, all of these things that can be a negative. And well, it is a negative side to competing that we need to be real with once you get super low body fat. Whereas I don't feel comfortable as a coach and ethical about doing that to someone who's 17, 18, some even 19-year-olds. So I'd feel much more comfortable putting them in ICN bikini than in IFBB bikini for that reason. Now, I obviously personally love IFBB, but I think it's something that needs to wait till you're a little older to do. But again, just my opinion, depends on the individual, all of those factors. So for me, I think I started competing when I was 22 or 23, somewhere around there. And my first show was IFBB, and I don't think I was ready. I should have probably done ICN first. I didn't have enough muscle. I was kind of skinny fat on stage. No, definitely not fat, but I was just skinny. I think I was 49 kilos. Which is crazy because I have more muscle mass on me than that now. I'm like, I got a DEXA done not long ago and I was 55 kilos just of muscle mass. So not including fat mass. I think I was like 67 kilos on the scan then. So crazy. So my next stage weight will probably be around 59, 60 kilos, which is insane to think about that compared to my first comp. So 10 kilos up on stage, going on, 8 years now we're talking. So going back to that point, it can be more expensive as a bikini competitor, so I would understand the financial commitments and obligations, and then obviously coaching as well. Now, I don't just say this as a coach, but honestly, do not skimp on coaching. Don't go with someone just because they're cheaper than someone else, because you may get a crap service for that price. They may also not be as experienced and not as good at what they do. I'm not saying all the time, but I'm just saying some of the time. I've seen coaches range anywhere from $50 a week for a comp prep to $200 a week for a comp prep. It really depends on who you're working with, what's included in that. So you might be comparing someone that's $50 a week with someone who's $100 a week, but the person that's $50 a week, you're only checking in on a fortnightly basis. You don't have any phone calls, you don't have any posing included. You got to pay for that on top of it, pay for this, pay for that. Whereas someone who's $100 a week might be including all of that in their service. So it kind of levels out at the end of the day. So be sure you understand what you're getting with that coach. I tend to just do the big packages where I put everything together because I'd rather that than the client have to worry about money and different things down the line. Not just that, but it makes it much easier. It doesn't get as messy. It's like, cool, I'm in charge of everything. And you're like, your posing, your nutrition, your training. I know what's going on. And that for me as a coach, me being a bit of a control freak with my clients, works much better in terms of results, because I used to do it the other way where it was a little less and then I kind of had add-ons for things. It got really messy and people would be then worrying about money and being like, oh, I can't book another posing session because I haven't got any money, but they needed it. So I'm like, oh, let's just put it all in one package. So be cautious with that. Let's say, for example, I've heard of some horror stories. The most expensive isn't always the best either. I've heard of someone that was getting coached by someone in Queensland. She was paying $170 a week, which is to your upper end. That's a bit more expensive for a prep, but that was just for nutrition. So not even training. She had like a phone call with a coach once every month or so. Her diet wouldn't change. Sometimes, not saying that's a bad thing. If you're getting results and it's not changing, that's fine. But she wasn't getting results and wasn't actually getting any leaner. So that to me is insane. If you're paying $170 a week and you're not getting results and you're not getting any changes and that's just nutrition, then you maybe want to have like a look at that service and what you're actually getting for that and have a chat to the coach. Now, I don't believe it's all about like the bells and whistles and like all the extra add-ons, but I think it's more the communication with the coach. And I'll admit I haven't been the perfect coach along my whole coaching career, but I've aimed to optimize now what I do with my clients, the way I communicate. I'm much more accessible these days and have got some much better systems in place to make sure that they get the best results possible. And if they're unhappy and they tell me, then I'll do something about it. I'm very open and honest with my clients and feedback. And if they're like, hey, I need you, can you do this? We'll try to make something work, obviously within reason. So that's something you need to consider, that if you're going to be doing at least a 20-week prep, paying someone, I would say the average comp prep is going to be around about $100 a week. So that's around $2,000 there. Your bikini is going to be around about $500. That's $2,500. Then you're going to have your tan, hair and makeup, let's say extra little bits and pieces, another $500. That's $3,000. Then you're going to have your federation entry fees and show entry fees, which can range anywhere from like $200 to $500, depending on division, if you're getting photos, all of that. So let's just say all the upper ends here. So we're at about $3,000, so about $3,500. And then not to mention if you need any extra supplementation, things like that for contest prep, protein powder, whatever, might be another few $100, but that's probably pretty standard to what you're already intaking anyway. I don't tend to jack up a lot more supplements during my clients' comp preps. They tend to spend less money on food because they're on less food when they're dieting. I don't think that the food side of things is that expensive, again, unless you're a bodybuilder. I think for bikini girls, the food side of things is actually cheaper when you're prepping. For bodybuilders, it may be more around about the same. So realistically looking at it and going, okay, that's how much I'm going to be spending. Now, then if you're also flying interstate to compete, more money. So at the moment I'm prepping for WBFF. I have to have a bikini and a costume, and I will tell you how much those cost. I didn't want to think about it. My bikini for that was around $600, and my costume is just over $1,000. And the costume lady did give me a good deal on that. So just for my costume and bikini alone, $1,500. I have to go compete in Sydney, so flying over there, accommodation, that's going to be at least another $1,000, if not more. Entry fees are quite expensive for WBFF, so it's definitely more expensive than IFBB, but obviously it's a slightly more glamorous show as well, so that's okay. I'm prepared for that, but yeah, it's a lot of money to be realistic about. Okay, moving on from money. So the next things that you need to be prepared for or know if you're ready to compete. Definitely the biggest thing I look at when clients come to me and ask me to prep them is where they are in terms of their metabolic positioning and I guess, yeah, their health overall. So making sure that you're not starting a prep in a bad place. So what I mean by that is, let's say for example, you've been dieting down for summer and you're like, yeah, I look pretty good, maybe I could do a show, and you've been on this 12-week diet and your calories are pretty low, you're on like, 1,200 calories a day and you're doing lots of HIIT training and lots of cardio, and you email a coach and you're like, yeah, I really want to compete in this show coming up in 3 months. Now, the hard thing about that is, yes, you might look reasonably lean, but you're in a place where there's not a lot of room to move. So if you need to make changes to your physique, say if you need to put on muscle or whatever, you're probably going to need more time than 3 months to gain muscle and prep into a show. So I would highly recommend, unless you're eating a lot of food, doing little cardio and weight training consistently, to probably wait longer to prep with someone. That being said, I would always recommend working with a coach in your off season. If it's your first ever show, ideally if you can afford it, try to work with a coach for at least 6 months prior to the show, as well as your comp prep, because then they can work with you in the off season, because that's where you're going to be building muscle, on where you need to grow and develop, or at least get a once-off session with a coach and an assessment. That's something that I do once off, an hour with someone, just give them feedback, say, yep, you need to go work on this, this, and this in your off season, come back to me, and then I'll prep you, so that's kind of how it works as well. Obviously, like I said, I prefer to work with them the whole time in the off season, but financially a lot of people can't afford to do that, which is fine. So we need to make something work for them. So the other big one is making sure that your head is in the right place, that you're competing for the right reasons. I believe that a lot of people prep for the wrong reasons, that they prep because I've had the different ones over the years, people asking me to compete and prep them. The most common one is probably like they're doing it to boost their self-esteem, to get the body. I guess that's the thing. They're looking at it and they're like, I want that fitness body, so that's why I'm going to compete. That is definitely the wrong reason to compete, because the fitness body and what you see on stage is not sustainable. You're going to have to gain fat after you come out of it. You're going to need a reverse diet. You're going to need to do X, Y, and Z to get your health back on track, all of that, especially if you're doing a division that requires you to be very, very lean in condition. Because what tends to happen is you compete, and mainly more so with females, guys are all about making gains, but a lot of girls, they compete and they're like, oh my God, I want to maintain this physique. I love the way I look. And then they realize they feel like shit because they're on low calories and they can't sustain it. And then you have problems down the line. So my biggest advice to you is understand that you're getting that physique for one day. I'm not saying you need to blow out post-comp, absolutely not. But you're going to need to accept that you're going to have to gain a little bit of body fat back afterwards. So if you're seeing that as your goal physique, then it's probably not the best reason to compete. I would say good reasons to compete would be the fact that you are a competitive person and that you have a good shape and good structure, and you could potentially be competitive and you see this as a sport. I think that's the most important thing. Understand that it's a sport. It's not just fun and games. Like a lot of people also want to compete just because it looks fun. I would say that is a bad reason to compete, because dieting is not always fun. You're going to be hungry, you're going to be tired, you're going to be moody. And as much as comp day is fun, the lead up to it is incredibly hard and difficult. And as much as even when I try to make my clients' prep experience as positive as possible, you can't lie and say that prep is sunshine and rainbows. And I'm not going to lie to people and say that just so you pick me as your coach. And a lot of coaches will say that. They'll be like, oh, my clients have the easiest preps. And I'm like, do they really? Like, is that really what happens? Because I have not met a single person that's never had a hard day in a prep, that's never struggled, that's never been tired, hungry, whatever it may be. So understand that if you're doing it just for fun, you've got to look at the financials, how you're feeling, all of those things. Is your shape going to be competitive? All of that. Is it worth it? And the reasons that I would be competing is, like I said, that you're seeing it as a sport, you're seeing it as something that you can push yourself in, you're seeing what you're capable of. I think that they're good reasons to compete. If you're like, okay, I've been training for X amount of years in the gym and I know I've built some muscle, but I want to see what's underneath and I want to see what I'm capable of, then great reasons to compete. Or maybe you do have a great genetic shape and you're like, I just need to chip some fat off and I think I'm going to do all right. The other big thing is definitely not going in with the expectation to win. That's definitely something for another video, but I think that just being realistic about putting your best package up on stage and hoping that that is a competitive one. So guys, I'm not going to make this video too long today, but I think the other things that you need to think about as a first-time competitor is definitely understanding the importance of things like posing, hair, makeup, and presentation. I think my first ever comp, I focused so much on just getting lean and getting the body fat off and not so much on the other side of things. And when I got my feedback from my first show, it was more so work on your presentation, work on your posing, yes, gain a little bit of muscle, but it wasn't as much about my physique as what I thought it was going to be about. They were literally like hammering home, like you didn't know how to walk, you didn't know how to pose, you weren't smiling, you looked nervous, like all of those things that are so important. And you might have the best physique, and then you get up there and your posing is terrible and you're not confident, and some girl that doesn't have as good a physique as you beats you, and then your friends see the stage photos and they're like, oh, you look so much better than her. And it's like, well, you weren't there at the show to judge, and you can't really pass that judgment unless you were there, because it's all about the presentation and the overall. And that's why I try to not make judgmental comments if I'm not physically at a show or able to see a live video, because photos don't really paint the best picture of a show. So that's really something to understand as well. Another tip for someone, if you're thinking about competing, is go to a show. If you've never been to a show before, get your ass to a show. Go and see what it's all about, because like I said, photos don't do it justice. You need to see what happens, what it's about. So go to a show that you're potentially going to compete in that federation and the division, so you can see it up close, and then also potentially try to get backstage and see what the girls look like off stage, because you look very different on stage to off stage. You look a lot bigger and fuller up on those stage lights, and then you go backstage and everyone's very like malnourished and gaunt and shredded. So definitely get your ass to a show. So guys, I hope these tips help in terms of if you're thinking about competing, help you understand the process a little bit better. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think the other big one is understand that in your off season, you got to get your calories in. If you want to grow, if you want to be in a good place when you start your prep, you got to push some food in. A lot of my girls get a little scared to eat in their off seasons. And it's super important to not be too worried about gaining a small amount of body fat, to get those calories in and get your metabolism in a great place, because it's going to make prep easier, it's going to make you happier, you're going to have more muscle mass, all of these positive benefits. Don't be scared of food, don't be scared of a tiny bit of body fat. That is a-okay. It means you're healthy, you're thriving, all of those positive things. So if you have any questions, I already contest prep below. You can always pop down in the link and you can send through an application, and I run a coaching business with my partner Sean, and that is musclearchitects.com. We are taking on clients for next year, so season A 2019. So if you want to start working with us in the off season now, would be a great time to start now. So guys, that is it for now, and I'll chat to you in the next video. Be sure you give it a like, give it a subscribe down below so that I know you want more and more content, and I'll chat to you soon. See ya.